to
She had
her.
good intentions.
Yeah, so welcome again to Bible study, and let me know if I'm coming through. Pastor Don's gonna walk in the other room and check
I
it.
make sure,
Make sure.
hang on,
Something?
I just have to make sure, there's a little.
It looks crooked to me, is it?
Well, you're straight though, oops, wait a minute, hang on.
Okay,
Oh, here, we're just kinda, yeah,
it looks kind of crooked.
well, if you want, how do you want me to do it?
I don't know.
Say, it's like I'm the producer, right?
Yeah, you are the producer, the cameraman, the director, you're everything.
You're live, sir.
Okay, well, we're having fun here. It's Bible study night, so we're gonna be laughing, for sure. Okay, welcome to our study of Book of Acts, and we're finishing chapter 27 tonight, which is exciting, making some real progress. It is, though, lesson 99 of the Book of Acts.
I'm not gonna finish it.
Can hardly believe it. 99 lessons in the Book of Acts.
Wow.
So 27:39, and this will be the actual shipwreck tonight, as we've promised. As promised, we'll cover the actual shipwreck, and we'll read from verse 39 to verse 44, where they're finally on the island. So, want to go ahead and read that, huh?
Sure.
Okay.
When daylight came, they did
Okay,
not.
hold on. Question
I thought last week we did 21 to 37.
38.
38, well, throw me off. Okay, I see. Mine
They
is.
lighten the ship
Okay, yeah,
and
I got it.
throwing out
Never
the
mind.
rest of the wheat.
Never mind.
That's okay.
Mine
That's
is.
okay.
Both of them side-
Maybe you're right. Maybe we should.
Should we read 38?
Read 38, just to,
All right.
for
Just
Ken's
because.
Yeah.
peace of
Just
mind.
because.
Well,
But he might be right.
He might
I think
be.
he is, because I have
Okay,
that from last week.
Okay, Ken, you got it. You got it right.
Keep us on our toes there, Ken.
All right, verse
All right.
38. When they had
38.
as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach, where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea, and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move. The bow stuck fast and would not move. And the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion wanted to save Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely.
Quite a story.
Yeah.
Quite an ending. Well, in ninth grade, in English class, we had to study poetry. Now, I wasn't a real big fan of poetry until I got to this one. Alfred Lord Tennyson, Crossing the Bar. Sunset and evening star and one clear call for me, and may there be no morning of the bar when I put out to sea. But such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew out from boundless deep turns again to home. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. For though from out of our born time and place the flood might bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. Crossing the bar. This is the moment Paul and the crew have to cross the bar. Of course, the metaphor is the bar between life and death. That's the bar that Sir Alfred Tennyson was talking about, crossing the bar. It is a powerful metaphor, and it's our opportunity to find out who the pilot really is of our lives. That's the moment when it becomes the most crucial, if you will. We've been talking about facing our fears. Our greatest fear is the fear of crossing the bar. The fear of having to make that final journey. So last week we talked about that section in the passage where an angel visited Paul. And the angel had a two-part message, first saying that this boat is going to run aground. Ekpipto was that Greek word, means it's going to fall from the sea. So you don't really realize that the sea, you think the sea as lower than the land. But when the ship arrives at the sea, it arrives on a wave and is actually above the land. And you end up falling onto the land. So that's why you need a pilot, to make sure that you don't crash when you fall and you can land the ship. So Thanksgiving is what Paul thought was led to have the whole crew and all the passengers embrace a Thanksgiving, because God is going to bring them all through safely. And the angel promised them, look, the Lord has given these 276 souls into your hand. That's pretty amazing scripture. Now, daylight finally comes after 2 weeks of not knowing or seeing where they were, 2 weeks of that. Daylight finally arrives and they realize they're by the shore, as they had surmised because of the sounding. They knew they were by the shore and they had let out the 4 anchors. And when daylight came, they didn't recognize it. So epikonosko means they had no familiarity with this place, what shoreline they were seeing. They didn't know it accurately at all, but they could observe it. So in verse 40 or 39, they didn't recognize it, but they observed it. That means they carefully considered by looking at it, how can we get to this shore? And they made this resolution. So they resolved to drive the ship on. Now, that means basically they had a consultation. So probably it was those same 3 guys. They had this consultation between the owner, the pilot, or the helmsman, he wasn't a pilot, and the centurion. And they decided that their best, course of action was to run the boat up to the beach. Now, it's interesting. People have asked down through the centuries, where was this on Malta? Malta's not a very big island. We should know exactly where this was. And it is amazing that due to this description, you can pick out almost the exact spot where this happened. So there's many clues, and if we look at all the clues, particularly in this paragraph right here, we know pretty much exactly where this occurred on the southeast coast of Malta, which is where they would be driven to if they're coming over from Greece, the 470 miles from Crete all the way to Malta. They would be driven to that southeast coast. Now, one of the main features of that southeast coast is this reef that they ran into. And believe it or not, some divers from Malta decided what they would do is they had so many good clues, and they knew almost for certain, because of this reef, they could go out and find these 4 anchors. And believe it or not, they did. And because they were divers, they recovered anchors in those days, in the Roman times, were basically boxes filled with lead. So they would be sturdy wooden boxes, and you'd fill them with lead, and you'd tie a stout rope to it, and that would be your anchor. So they found the boxes. 2 of them they melted down and made diving weights out of them. So this happened in the 50s, so this is not that long ago. One of them they preserved in a museum, so there is one of these anchors that did escape. It's in St. Thomas Bay. The name of the reef is La Serra, and it means the saw. And it's on ancient maps. You can actually find that reef on ancient maps going back hundreds of years. I think the oldest one I found was 16 something. So the saw, the reef that they ran into is found on these ancient maps. Now, what they are going to need is someone. Now you got to understand, the sailors and the helmsmen, they can look out over the top of the water to try to understand. What they need is someone that can see through the water. And there's only one kind of sailor that can do that, and that would be the pilot. When you come into a bay like this, you need a pilot. Now, a pilot is a completely different type of person. He's not assigned to the ship. He's assigned to the shore. And so he comes out from the shore to steer the boat over the bar, through the bar, so that you can make your way into the bay. And all the major bays around the world have these. When we were in Alaska, you couldn't just go into a bay in Alaska. You had to have a pilot come out on your cruise ship and steer your cruise ship into the bay. So in the U.S. Navy, they have pilots. And most people think they fly airplanes. There is no such thing as a Navy pilot. They are called Navy aviators. A pilot is a whole different thing. A pilot is a guy that knows not just the surface of the water, he knows what's under the water. He knows how to cross the bar. So pilot comes from the word pilon. It's a word meaning the oar that steers the ship. And that is what they needed. And they didn't have one on the ship because they weren't going into a port that they recognized. In fact, there was no port. It was just a bay. And so they are going to try to cross this bar in the only manner that they know, and that is to lighten the ship as much as possible, to get it as light as they possibly can, and drive it as fast as they can. Now, when you're crossing the bar, you always want to cross at anybody when the water's the deepest.
Yes.
High
tide. So you're going to wait for high tide. You're going to cast off your anchors, get as much speed as you can, and try to get over that bar because you can't see what's underneath. So, of course, they don't have a pilot.
know there's a bar, probably.
They know there's something, but they don't really know what it is. And of course, they're going to fail miserably, unfortunately. However, they sort of do have a pilot, right? Yeah. So, in fact, the only pilot that can get you over the eternal bar in life, he's the only one. They do have a pilot, and the pilot was speaking to them through an angel. And so they're going to learn to trust this pilot as they go through this experience. So let's go on to verse 40. Verse 40 says, "And casting off the anchors, they left them in the sea, while at the same time they loosened the rope of the rudder and hoisted the foresail to the wind and headed to the beach." How do you cast across the bar? Well, there's basically a couple of steps here. Casting off, cutting the anchor, loosening the steering, and hoisting the sail to let the wind take you. It's very interesting. Casting off means periago. It means to take away what surrounds you, to cast off. In fact, it is how God removes sin from us. It's how he does it. He casts it off us. Now, the casting off is cutting that natural safeguard, the anchor. Cutting those natural safeguards. Loosening means give up on steering your own life, okay? You're going to let go of the tiller. This is how we're going to cross the bar. We're not going to navigate this bar at the end of our lives in any other way. We're going to allow God, the pilot, to take us over the bar. Let go of the steering. Hoisting the sail means you're going to allow God to drive you with his breath of his wind. And we'll see how God is going to steer these guys. Now, he's already made a prophecy about this ship. It's the same with us, right? When we have to cross the bar, the ship doesn't get to cross the bar, right? So as much as they could do on their own strength, we knew that this was not going to survive. The ship was not going to survive. As the angel had made the prophecy, as we read before, the ship will not make it, but all 276 people will survive. Removing, when the pilot begins to steer the ship, we have to let go. When a pilot comes on board, the captain and the owner of the ship, they can't tell him what to do. They've got to trust him. The pilot works for the harbor, not for the shipmaster, and they have to trust in the pilot that he will get them over the bar safely. Though I cross the shadow of the valley of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The pilot is with me. That is how we cross the bar. We cross the bar because I am the resurrection and the life, Jesus told us. He's already crossed the bar for us. He's already swallowed up death in his victory for us. So he's already made this journey for us. And in this revelation of allowing God to be, how many of you had to read that book, God is My Co-Pilot? It's a terrible title. Okay, because what we want to do is let go of the wheel entirely and let God be the pilot to cross the bar. Okay, so this is what, basically living our life for God comes down to. Cutting the anchor lines of security in this world, taking our hand off the wheel, and raising the sails to go forward with God. There was a wonderful missionary call at the missions conference I was at last week. And they asked the kids, the young people that were there, I call them kids, but they were either last year of med school or in their residency, so mid-20s, to, in faith, raise their sail and allow God to set a direction for them. To let go of, and this is a powerful experience for them. And it was done with prayer and with a lot of encouragement and worship in the worship service, just to raise the sail and let go and see where God sends you. It was an incredible missionary call. So we find a really interesting, in verse 42, of course, they strike the reef, the Lacera, and it's where the two seas meet. And that's how they pinpointed this reef. It was where the two seas meet. And once they found that, it was easy to figure out which reef this was. And they call it Lacera because it had destroyed so many ships in the past. It was the buzzsaw of Malta.
Wow.
And it just swallowed up ships. And of course, their ship stood no chance. And it's, basically in verse 20, verse 22 is where the angel said that the ship must die. The ship must be destroyed that you may live. Striking the reef, peripipto, means they fell into it and it was locked in place. So they fell into this rocky reef. Now, I know it called it a sandbar, but that is not what it looks like on the pictures. It looks nasty. And so when they hit that reef, it grabbed hold of the ship. And it actually, in verse 41, where the two seas met, they ran the vessel aground, the prow struck fast and became immovable. Immovable, as silatos, means unshakably, it grabbed it in such a stable, unshakable position that the rest of the ship was unbound, broken up. Unbound means all the nails were just let go. So the ship was basically destroyed. And this is where we are right at the bar. The pilot has us right on the bar. And according to the pilot, seems like Paul lives his life there at the bar. I don't know, he's just that kind of guy. In Philippians 1:23, let's see if I can pull that up quickly. 1:23, I'm hard pressed from both directions, having the desire to depart and be with Christ, for that's much better. Yet to remain on in the flesh is necessary for your sake. So it seems like Paul's at this spot quite a few times. And I mean, we've read, I don't know how many accounts of Paul coming, being thrown in prison and being stoned and beaten and whipped. And, in 2 Corinthians, he actually gives the sum total of that. And it seems like Paul is living on the precipice of life and death throughout the rest of for his life. And of course, he's going to finish the race eventually. He will actually get to the bar. In 2 Timothy 4, he describes this to Timothy, verse 7. I'm all ready to be poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has finally come. I fought the good fight and finished the course and kept the faith. And in the future, there's laid up for me a crown. So here he is at the crossing right here at the bar. And he says, I am at Telios. That's what the crossing is. It's the finishing line. As a Christian, it's the goal of our whole life. We're running the race. And the crossover line, the bar, if you will, it's the finish line of the race. And Paul is describing it as now everything of my life has come to its conclusion, its finishing point. And finally, my life is perfected. Some people here have watched this happen. If you talk to hospice care workers, they watch it happen. And I'll never forget the nurse, when my mom was dying, telling me about it. He said, you have to look at it as a beautiful thing. You have to look at it as this person's going on to a much better place. Because that's how they're seeing it. And you're seeing it out of your grief and your anger toward a disease or toward a circumstance, but the way they're seeing it is a completely different experience. So, we read the scripture, precious in the sight of the Lord is
The death of his
the
saints.
death of his saints.
Yeah,
We read that. But then when we experience it, it's at a different place. We experience it the way these sailors were experiencing. And that these sailors, the last thing they wanted was to crash into the boat. Because they didn't have the same faith as the person who was going through at the bar, and it wasn't until a decision was made, and it's really interesting that the decision is actually made by the centurion, and when we go on to read the account, particularly when we get to the end here, in verse 42, the soldiers' plan was to kind of kill the prisoners so that none would swim away and escape. But the centurion wanted to bring Paul safe and kept them from their intention and commanded then what they were going to do. So it's interesting that it is the centurion that now took the leap of faith to cross the bar. So the centurion, the soldiers, if anybody escaped, guess what? They're dead. Okay, they can't let, that's a standing Roman order. You cannot let anybody escape on penalty of death. So, if there's a possibility, well, of course they're going to try to kill them. That was their plan. The centurion countermanded that order because, again, he's moving as this he's got this vision now that somehow he's received from Paul. And this vision basically was that the centurion wanted to bring Paul safe. So the word safe, diazozo, means he's going to come through this whole process, and he's going to rescue this whole process. And he's got this vision now, and he says to them, "Okay, jump." That's what he ends up saying. He said, "You people that can swim, jump." The word "jump." It means to throw yourself in. Now, this is this. How many have been on one of those 1 meter diving boards? Remember that?
I haven't been on one.
Yeah, you have.
I have?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember when we were we were at a pool in West Virginia, and they had one of those high platforms that you would dive off of. You ever been in one of those platforms?
We had a public pool where we grew up, and there was a platform. I don't know how high it was.
Uh-huh.
As a kid, you
So, they had
At least
these.
20 feet.
Yeah, 20. Now, 20. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, it was 100 feet high.
Oh, my God.
This was 20 maybe.
And we're raising
So
feet.
this is it. This is the scariest part of the whole thing. Because now you have done all the rest of that stuff. You've cast off, you've let the anchor go, you've let the steering go. Now you have to jump in. That's the scariest part of the whole thing. So because it was the centurion, the soldiers had no, they really had no option, and so they jumped in, and the swimmers, they could, you keep in mind you're caught on the rocks, but you can see the beach, and so the vision is the swimmers could just jump in over the reef and swim into the shore. That's the vision.
I'm trying to picture a Roman soldier with all that they're wearing.
Oh, they had to throw all that off.
Yeah, I think that's all good.
Yeah, they had to throw all that weight, all that armor. I don't even know if they could get their sword in.
Yeah.
With probably just maybe the.
It seems like
The
they'd have
knife.
to jump in behind the reef and then get to the reef and
Well,
go past it.
yeah, you have to figure out a way to get over the reef.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I don't think the ship's bow
right.
got
Over.
past it.
Yeah. We don't. I guess we don't know that.
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
Maybe we don't know that part. What did Jesus say about the jump? Okay, Luke 9. It's one of my favorite scriptures. Luke 9, 23 and 24. If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily to follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake, he is the one who will save it. That's what the jump really is. The jump is abandoning, losing your life for his sake. You're making the leap, if you will. You're making the jump. What is the greatest advice ever given? Anybody know? The greatest advice ever given. It was in the Gospels. It was in Cana. And it was, whatever he says, do it. The greatest advice that's ever been given. The jump, it's the scariest part of the whole thing, but it is the point at which we cross the bar, the jump. The leap into his piloting us across the bar. Someday we all have to make the leap. Someday we're all going to face the bar, and we're going to make the leap. And we're going to, basically we're going to allow God to pilot us across the bar. As Lord Tennyson said, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I cross the bar. I hope to see, when the storms of life bring me to that point, I hope to see the pilot. Because the pilot is the only one that can bring us to this place, diasozo, which means we're rescued, we're safe. And it's probably the word for this passage because it comes up twice. The commander had the word, which is surprising. This guy is going to get saved, Julius. Because he's got the understanding from Paul now that this is the way to be saved. This is how we're going to make it. And he commands them to jump. And the rest would follow on some planks and other various floating things, barrels and whatnot that are still floating. And so it happened, they were brought safely to land. So they did find Diasozo. They crossed the bar. It's encouraging to know that we have a pilot. We're not pilotless. We don't face eternity, the darkness alone. And though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now, all you have to do is talk to someone who's had a near-death experience, and they'll tell you exactly what that is. They'll say, I was going through a dark tunnel, the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. So we finally got to the point where the ship is completely destroyed, yet every soul. Now, when he says in verse 11 or verse 22, the angel said to Paul, yet I know and urge you to keep up courage. There will be no loss of life, but only of the ship. And this ship contained 270 souls.
That's amazing.
Not one would die. Now, the word for soul, suke, means breathing. No one is going to not breathe. What do we call that when we're thrown into the sea? Drowning. So no one is going to drown. Everyone is going to be a living soul. That's why